So I'm going to talk today about dyslexia and coding. I've been doing a little bit of research into it and I found some pretty cool things, so I wanted to share it with you guys. Basically, I have dyslexia and I've been finding over the last year and a bit, I've been learning and working as a developer. It's thrown up some pretty cool and interesting stuff. Yeah, and I wanted also people working with people with dyslexia and how kind of you guys can understand that better and work with them a bit better. So I've got a quick demonstration just to kind of visualize what having dyslexia can be like for some people. So this is a definition of dyslexia starting here. So you guys can try and read that for a bit.
It keeps moving, Dave.
I think that's the point. So yeah, it's pretty hard to kind of get going, and it's hard to visualize kind of what dyslexia is, and it's not like that when I read a book, but it's the kind of how hard that is to read a page is the kind of exhaustion that I can get after reading a page. So imagine kind of reading like that, and that's kind of how it is. Yeah, so this is a nicer explanation. Which is just saying it's specific without getting too in depth into it. And I don't actually really know too much of the science behind it, but it's just kind of a different, like a learning difficulty. And I don't like to view it as a kind of disability or anything. It's just a different way that I've had to learn information and process information. Yeah, so there's some facts, because I think it's quite often people have a bit of a misunderstanding of the facts about dyslexia. 1 in 10 people are thought to have dyslexia, and that means that a lot of people actually don't know they have dyslexia. I find actually a lot of people who use computers. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 18 because I'd always use a computer to cover up the fact that I was dyslexic. So at school, I was always very handy with a computer, and I became very good at computing because I had dyslexia, and I used it as my aid. So yeah, that's quite a cool fact. It's not just a difficulty in reading, spelling, writing. That's just how it can manifest itself. And it can manifest it in different ways in different people. So, something I might struggle with someone else might find really easy with dyslexia, and vice versa. You don't grow out of it. It's much more prevalent in children. You can really see it, but as an adult, you kind of learn to deal with it. And we're in an education system where they don't necessarily understand dyslexia, and you have one learning style and you have to learn like that. So for me, I had to define my own kind of learning style, and it took me a lot longer to do that. And I don't think people would necessarily realize I have dyslexia because I've kind of come up with these ways of dealing with it. So yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about some observations I had, so you guys can maybe understand what it's like programming with dyslexia, and yeah, just get a little bit of an insight into it. I didn't want to focus on like positives and negatives, because I really firmly believe that dyslexia isn't a negative or disability, which I mentioned earlier. One of the new languages are quite hard for me to get into, so I found from reading and speaking to other people with dyslexia, other programmers with dyslexia, that the use of an IDE and an interactive kind of environment that you can interact with the language. So with Ruby, it's a dream, and also with the Go playground, it's been really useful. It really helps to be able to actually work, rather than just reading through an example and compiling it. It really helps to play around with it and kind of see how it works. So yeah, that's that. Long textbooks aren't as hard as you would imagine. I come from a social science background. I used to have to read massive long textbooks, and they were so hard for me. But I've read through massive books here, and just because I can break them up with code examples and kind of go through it and kind of play around with it, and that's the kind of thing, it's interacting with it and actually doing and making something. Yes, that's quite cool. My spelling when I'm kind of coding, I think anyone that's pairing me has to kind of really look out for that, because I will not see it as a spelling mistake. I'll be like, that is a perfectly valid way to spell a word. And I also can then, if I'm working by myself, that can go across a whole load of code, which can then be dangerous. So yes, I should stop copy and pasting, and anyone pairing with me should look out for that. Greater than and less than symbols. this is quite interesting, and I found this with other people I've spoken to. It's because when dyslexics, they don't view words like everyone else would. They view shapes, and if a shape is really similar, and that to me is just so simple. I couldn't tell you what is a greater than the less than symbol. I have to Google it or do some crocodile shit, and it's great. and yeah, so that's kind of a funny thing. But this is actually the most interesting thing I've found, and I kind of had a bit of an inkling because I've been reading a book called The Dyslexic Advantage, which kind of has this argument that it's not disadvantages. There's actually some really good things that come from dyslexia, and also how relevant it is to programming and being a developer. My dad has dyslexia, and he's been a very successful programmer all his life. And in this book, they have a case study of someone who literally is exactly the same as me. They literally just described me, and he became a computer programmer. Yeah, so and I also found this cool study into people learning computer science and also in programmers, and it actually found that it can be, rather than it may actually be a beneficial combat. There's a really cool thing about you can use the computer to create your own assistive technologies, and you can also circumvent weaknesses. But there's this cool thing about strengths, and I've only been doing this over the last few days, so I really can't develop this too much, but I really think there's something to do with object-oriented languages and the way dyslexics think, kind of in objects and how they interact with each other. And I'd like to do a bit more into this, so I can't tell you too much, but I really think that there's something there. And they do mention that in the study as well. They didn't go too far into it, but that object-oriented languages kind of seem to be, and all the programmers' blogs I found online all were Ruby bloggers, all of them. So that's quite cool. So yeah, a takeaway from this, I think, and this can actually be applied to working with anyone from any different life experiences, race, gender, sexuality, is that when you're pairing with someone, just understand that and be open to the fact that something you might find really easy, they might find really hard. And yeah, just be open and understanding of that.
Question from Slack. How do you kind of approach the situation when you like immediately say to somebody you might not have paired with before?
I actually don't, and I think maybe I probably should, but I don't think people really notice. I don't think it's necessarily something. Yeah, I think maybe I should, and also like if I make a spelling mistake, we were talking about this. Personally, for me, just make a joke about it and like don't be awkward and be like, oh god, he's made another spelling mistake. Just it's funny. It's some of the spelling mistakes are really funny. So yeah, just kind of open and talk about it.
And what's the best way that can help you and to sort of both use your advantages and strengths?
I think just I said be open and like just if I find that it's my kind of responsibility to explain something and understand what I'm struggling with. So as long as you're open to that and you're not stressed out that I'm taking a bit longer or I have to go to the IDE and play around with it for a bit, that's literally all the other person needs to do.
So it's, in my experience, artists have this widespread belief that a lot of artists are dyslexic. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's certainly. And I was just wondering, because you're talking about sort of like strengths and weaknesses, and whether there's a model of there being like a hidden strength in this area, and whether that strength might be something to do with spatial reasoning and thinking in sort of like space and colour.
That's exactly it, and I can see it in myself when I made and it was for the tech test here. I remember I got so into it because I was just imagining this checkout area and like little projects I've been doing here as well. I don't get to do it as much as I'd like because we're doing more smaller stuff, but when I've taken on a big project and I can kind of visualize it in my head and I really kind of see myself come to life, I'm good at this. I can actually do it, which is a great feeling and something that's, because struggling through education my whole life is really exciting for me. So. Yeah.
I'm really dyslexic. Probably don't realise that. I suffer a problem too, and I still also don't know the greater than and less than thing. Maybe you could explain that dial trick, because I still have to do it every time.
I still don't know. It's to do with the chomping, so that if it's chomping, you draw teeth on the crocodile and then it's chomping the thing. That's how kids learn it. I'll show you after. Any other questions?
Have you tried doing anything with your own assistive technologies? Have you tried to write plugins to editors to like, I don't know, make it clearer?
There's 2 weeks as an assistive technology hackathon that I'm trying to think of some ideas for. There's some cool stuff. There's like a open dyslexic font, which is amazing. They have it on the Kindle, and it just makes the words a better shape. And there's also, everyone really hates Comic Sans, but it's actually great for dyslexics. So that's the one good thing about Comic Sans, because it's just the shapes that it makes. So I found that switching to these things, and I'd like to do something with that font maybe. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. All I know is the open dyslexic one, which kind of makes the shapes nicer. Cool.
That was awesome.